Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Conan Serpent War from Marvel Comics. This is a new mini-series that just came out. It is a $5 issue, and that's $5 because you get 10 extra pages of story, so it's a 30-page story. And as you can see on the cover, it has Conan and quite a few different characters from different time periods in it. And just to kind of sum up my thoughts, the artwork, ranges from good to just kind of getting the job done. And the story, unfortunately, just isn't very engaging. It doesn't establish a particularly engaging scenario or menace for them to fight. There's no villain with any type of personality or definition given. It's a very cryptic threat. The action's not very exciting. And even with the extra 30 pages, it just doesn't establish any engaging characters. So if you see this on the shelf and you're like just a random comic fan being like, hey, should I pick this up? My advice would be no. However, if you are a fan of Conan or a fan of Robert E. Howard or Sword and Sorcery or just, kind of comics outside of the realm of normal superhero comics, this might have some interest to you. And there is some excitement to this issue, even if the execution is a little lackluster because of the characters in it. And I want to spend some time talking about that. And so let's start with the most obvious character, which is Conan. His name is on the cover. So we have him in his early career. This is right after issue 7 of the Marvel Comics Conan the Barbarian series back in the 70s. This was an adaptation of God in the Bowl, and so he's just finished fighting a creature called the Man Serpent. And I want you to take a look at how the Man Serpent is drawn and keep that in mind, because this is what the Man Serpent looked like in Conan the Barbarian number 7. This is a reprint of it, but this is what he looked like. So he looks completely different, and that's very disorienting because first I was like, well, maybe this isn't the Marvel Universe Conan, but we have characters from the Marvel Universe appearing in the series, and plus we have these 3 medallions on his chest, which, yes, does indicate this is supposed to take place after this issue of Conan. I think that's a huge mistake, just basic storytelling 101. If you're doing a flashback, you need to make the flashback look like what it's flashing back to. Pretty simple. I don't know how they screwed that one up. Another thing is that it adds a curse that Conan got after fighting this Man Serpent. Maybe this is from looking in the bowl. It's called the God in the Bowl, and maybe after he looked in the bowl and saw Thothamon's engraving, which made him run away at the end of that story, maybe that's what cursed him. I don't know. Hopefully they'll expand on that. But as you can see, he can now see people as serpent men. Everyone's appearing, as like scaly and all this stuff to him. I don't know if this may be actual serpent men, or if maybe he's able to see through the serpent men's disguise because they can disguise themselves as normal humans, or if this is just an illusion, which he thinks it is. I will say, though, that Howard's serpent men, which were in the old comic series, were literally men with serpent heads. They didn't have like scaly skin and stuff, but again, since we're reinterpreting things, who knows? And that is one of my big questions, because IDW is still in the middle of adapting Cole, from my understanding. They still never finished that lousy mini-series called Cole Eternal that they were doing. And they have the rights to do the Serpent Men, so I don't know if that prevents Marvel from using proper Serpent Men from the Robert E. Howard stories or not. We haven't seen Cole pop up. He's not been announced for this miniseries. So let's talk about the characters that are in the issue. So this is James Allison, who is a Robert E. Howard character who remembers his past lives as different barbarian heroes. And so the artwork in this section is gorgeous. And honestly, this was the most engaging and interesting part of the comic, and absolutely had the best artwork because they had a different artist do this. The flashbacks are actually to a story called Valley of the Worm. And so the writer of the series has said that that story will be important to this mini-series, and hopefully it will be clarified in future issues for readers who haven't read Valley of the Worm, that is what is going on here, and whatever the connection will be. And Valley of the Worm is actually the first comic book appearance of James Allison. This is a reprint of this that is out right now. This is listed as Marvel True Believers Conan Serpent War #0, The Valley of the Worm, which is kind of a ridiculous thing, but I guess if your comic shop searches for any of those words, it'll show up and you'll be able to order this, or you can order it online. It is a really good adaptation that was drawn by Gil Kane back in the 70s, and of course Roy Thomas was involved with the writing, and it's just a really cool story about a barbarian that fights a giant monster, and it's beautifully done. It's definitely worth getting, and honestly a lot better than Serpent War #1. This is, if you get anything you see in this review, go get this issue. It's wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't think it was very well communicated that this is involved with the Serpent War story, because I saw hardly any copies of this on the shelf. My comic shop sold out, and this came out this week. And then the other comic shop in my town, I only had one copy left, so I don't think it was very well communicated or well known that this is, one of the characters in Serpent War. This is not the only James Allison story that got adapted. This is a reprint of Conan the Barbarian #9, and this is a adaptation of another James Allison story with a barbarian named Hunwolf. But what Roy Thomas did in the old Conan series was he would take stories that had Conan-like barbarians and substituting Conan for, in this case, Hunwolf. So this was a really cool issue, and if you ever get a chance to read this in any form, I recommend it because it was just a really cool story from Conan the Barbarian #9. But as far as I can tell, the only proper appearance before Serpent War of James Allison is that Valley of the Worm adaptation from the 70s. And so going through in order of appearance, Moon Knight is also in here, and he's a Marvel Comics superhero, and presumably he's here because he's the avatar of a moon god, Egyptian moon god named Khonshu, and that Egyptian moon god is in opposition to the serpent god Set. It's very odd though, because of all these characters, you'll notice Moon Knight is the one that doesn't have a sword. All the rest of these characters are sword fighters, so why is Moon Knight here? There are certainly characters in the Marvel Universe that have swords they could have used. There's Black Knight, there's a new character, I think his name's Swordmaster, who has a miniseries now, or series, whatever it is. And then there's Bloodstone, which I think would have fit in perfectly, because she already hunts supernatural monsters and stuff, so she would have fit right in. This is like what she does on a normal basis. So I think, a character like that would have been way more appropriate than Moon Knight, but who knows. And so let's talk about a character that is actually really exciting that he's in here, is Solomon Kane. And it's very exciting that he's in here because Marvel put out a lot of good comics books back in the 70s and 80s with Solomon Kane, so it was really good to see him back with Marvel. Now, the only thing about his appearance here is it's just not very exciting or engaging. And if you will indulge me for a minute, I just want to get on my soapbox and illustrate why the characters in here didn't really connect with me. So let me read you. Keep in mind, this is Solomon Kane's first appearance, and all you're going to know about this guy in this issue. So this is how they introduce him. A still-eyed savior on an endless odyssey to cleanse evil from God's land. Puritan and protector, his blade remarkable, his faith unshakable. He is called Solomon Kane. And so basically all that is doing is telling me he's a good guy because you need a good guy in there. He's just good because he's the protagonist. And so I don't really connect with the character. He just seems like a generic hero. Now, this is Solomon Kane #1 from back in the 80s. This is adapting a Robert E. Howard story called Red Shadows. And so on the first page, there is a bit of text introducing you to who Solomon Kane is. Also, love the artwork. But in the middle of that, there is this sentence that I think is very good at describing who he is. And so it reads, he is a driven man, possessed of the wanderlust which has ever taken him far from his native land and the persecution heaped upon his Puritan brethren by the Church of England. And so the reason that works for me is it describes who he is in human terms. He has wanderlust. I know people like that, people who want to wander around and experience things, and they're restless and they never settle down. I understand that. That's something that makes sense to me. I know people like that. And so he's also experienced persecution. And so that explains why he wants to be good, why he reacts so harshly when he encounters injustice, because he's seen it himself. And plus, just for fun, they throw in the fact that he's from England, so I know what accent to put in when he talks. This is storytelling. This is how you make a reader care about a character. Just a little bit. I mean, it's not a whole lot. I mean, he's not a very deep character. But you just need a little bit in there to make him identifiable. But again, why Solomon Kane's appearance here is so exciting is just the history of really good comics that Marvel has put out with this guy. All the color stuff is good, and I haven't read all the black and white stuff, but the ones I have are also good. I've never read a bad Marvel comic with Solomon Kane, and that's something I can't say about Dark Horse, unfortunately. A lot of the covers and the art, and even sometimes the story, just weren't very satisfying. This is Solomon Kane's first appearance in color, I believe. He had some black and white appearances before then. I believe this is probably his first color appearance. And Marvel did a miniseries, which I just showed you, back in the 80s, which was full color, and it was really wonderful. I highly recommend it. And you got cool covers like this. I mean, how awesome looking is that? And then, just to top it off, this is an issue and a cover by Mike Mignola, who created Hellboy. Yeah, you got stuff like this back in the day. And Marvel still has the resources to put out some good Solomon Kane comics. So I'm looking forward to that. And now for the biggest surprise in the issue, or at least in the solicitations, because unfortunately they gave away all the characters in here well before this was published. But the biggest surprise is Dark Agnes. This is a character Robert E. Howard created, and she's a French swordswoman. And I gotta say, she looks really great in this splash page right here. Unfortunately, the visuals you see are pretty much all you're gonna know about her. There's no attempt to actually explain what the heck is going on here. Presumably, this is her stabbing her husband to death. I hope he deserved it, because they just don't say what's going on. Presumably she became a mercenary. That's the only reason I can think of. She's, getting in these sword fights we see in this issue. But, some kind of explanation to her character would have really, really helped. I mean, not just orient you, because, okay, I can just accept she's a swordswoman who stabbed her husband to death, presumably because he deserved it, I hope. But I can't care about a character I don't know anything about, and that's the point of backstory, is to help me identify with the character, so when they get in a fight, I care. This is not Dark Agnes's first comic book appearance. As far as I know, the first appearance she had was in Dark Horse's Robert E. Howard's Savage Sword, and she actually even appears on the cover of the first issue. If you are looking very closely at the top here, there she is. So this is the title that she actually appeared in. This was kind of a series of short stories with different Robert E. Howard characters. This was really the first time we saw Dark Horse kind of delve into the more obscure characters, and so Dark Agnes was a part of this series. And probably the biggest surprise from Marvel, and one of the reasons I picked up Serpent War, is Dark Agnes is actually getting her own miniseries. And these are the covers. This is, I believe, the real cover, and this is the variant cover. Both look very nice, and so I'm definitely looking forward to this. And honestly, it's just really cool to see more obscure characters like this. When I was reviewing Valeria #1, I was like, it's really great to see a character like this that's never gotten a series, that's never, that rarely appears in Conan. It's good to see Marvel take a chance and give her a mini-series. And someone must have been watching that and was like, okay, I'll see your Valeria and raise you a Dark Agnes, because holy crap, this is probably the most obscure character I can think of that they could give a miniseries to. So good job, Marvel. I'm definitely picking this up. And she looks great, love the design. And I've heard people compare her to Red Sonja. Like, oh, she's Red Sonja-esque. Marvel's just putting this out because they don't have Red Sonja. They are both red-headed swordswomen. I will give you that, but it's kind of like saying Conan and Solomon Kane are the same character. No, they're not. They both have dark hair and they use swords and they fight supernatural stuff, but, Conan is not the same thing as Solomon Kane, nor is, a bikini-clad barbarian woman the same thing as a historical French swordswoman. Nope, sorry. But they're both good characters, and I'm certainly glad that we're getting Dark Agnes from Marvel. And I would be remiss if I did not point out that this does have 2.5 pages of a serialized text story of Solomon Kane in the back. And this text story is better than anything else in this issue. But obviously it's just 2.5 pages, so it's not really worth the $5 by itself. But if you do pick this up, at least there's a good Solomon Kane story in the back. And so, even though I did find the first issue's execution to be lackluster, I will be getting the rest just because I am familiar with these characters and I'm very interested in seeing what they do with them, and just to show my support, just to tell Marvel, like, hey, I want to see Solomon Kane. Hey, I want to see Dark Agnes. Hey, I want to see more adaptions of James Allison. Like, that would be amazing. So, Marvel, if you're listening, come on, give me. And also, and look, this is just pure speculation, but like, what if the big twist of this series is that we get Thulsa Doom as the villain, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Cole will come in and save the day? How amazing would that be? Or even better, Cole and Red Sonja come in and save the day, and we have all the Robert E. Howard characters back at Marvel again. That would be amazing. Don't expect it to happen, but it would be cool. So I'm going to stick around, see where this goes. I'm going to be patient with it and let you know what I think at the end of it. I'm not following any of the other Conan series right now other than Valeria. I am collecting that, and that will wrap up, let's see, I believe it's next week. So I'll be reviewing the whole mini-series and telling you if I think that the ending holds up to the beginning, which I quite liked. I quite liked that first issue. And one thing to note that I just found out, because I didn't get Savage Sword past the first plot line, that Savage Sword is not solicited for January and February, so December's issue may be it. I remember in my review, I was like, really? Marvel is going to do an ongoing series of rotating creative teams in today's comic market? And apparently I was probably right. And, 12 issues is not a bad run. Maybe they'll bring it back, with a new #1. Or maybe they're just going to be going with miniseries like, Serpent War instead. We'll just see. But that's basically all I got to say right now about Serpent War and the Robert E. Howard properties that are coming back to Marvel. Yay. So, like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, don't mess with Dark Agnes. She stabbed her husband to death for some reason I still don't know about. See ya. So let's talk about the other characters that are in this issue. So we have James Allison, which is a Robert E. Howard character who had a series of stories where he would remember his past lives as different sorts of barbarian heroes. And
Just a sec. Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
this is why you don't record videos with your phone in the same room. Sorry, guys.
I seem to be having trouble hearing you. Sorry about that.
Okay.